What's going on, everybody? Brezzy43 here. I am back with our next video. Series 10 is officially underway. I'm super excited. I've been playing some games with a Xerneas Stack Attack a Trick Room variation that's been really good. I'll be posting some videos with that team this week. I've also got more team building stuff coming at you. That's what we're going to be doing today, as well as a revisit to our Pokemon tier list for Series 10. So I'm planning on doing a bunch of uploading this week. Hopefully you all enjoy it, and hopefully we learn a lot about Series 10 and get out there and play it. Um, Today we're going to be talking about Calyrex Shadow Rider. This was a Pokemon that I had originally moved. I had rated it in the tier 1.5 alongside other things like Groudon, just because I didn't think that I thought the counterplay for that Pokemon was going to be too much for it to overcome, and I didn't actually think that it was going to be putting up as many results as it has thus far. I was wrong. It seems like people are figuring out the best ways to build this Pokemon, and I definitely think that um, that it's really powerful and should be respected in the metagame. So let's go ahead and jump into some teams here. We're going to follow the same pattern that we usually do. We're going to look at what other people are doing with the Pokemon, and then we're going to build a team on video together here. So this was the World Cup Open results that came back, and there were 4 Calyrex Shadow Rider in the top 16, which is impressive. That's 25% of the metagame, which is like pretty solid overall, considering that Zacian's really popular and was also, it looks like 4 as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Palkia had 2 in the top 8, which is pretty huge for Palkia. And then Xerneas looks like 1, 2, 3. Kyogre only had 2, and Eternatus had 1. That was the top 16, it looks like. I'm not missing anything, right? Right. Okay. So I've opened up these teams here. We're going to go ahead and take a look. Most of these Spectria are going to be, or I said Spectria, I'm sorry. Most of these Calyrex Shadow Rider are going to be running Life Orb. This one looks like it has foregone the Psychic move and decided to just run Double Ghost. I believe this is a hedge towards Wide Guard. Wide Guard being so popular on a lot of teams, being able to attack through Wide Guard is really nice. Whimsicott, Tailwind. This is a commonality on most of these teams. You're going to have Tailwind somewhere, or Whimsicott's going to be doing something. We've got the classic Firewater Grass here of Rillaboom, Incineroar, and Urshifu. And then Nihilego gives you some extra power against the Xerneas teams, which, if played correctly, boosted Xerneas can rip through Calyrex if you time it correctly with the ending of Tailwind. Secondly, we've got a variation of Calyrex that uses Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele is a Pokemon that I'm really interested in using, to be truthful. I think that this Pokemon is super sweet with Calyrex. It gives you access to Expanding Force, which is another insanely powerful spread attack that Calyrex gets access to in addition to Astro Barrage. Tons of damage coming out from these two together. Terrain boosted and stab boosted is just nuts. Additionally, Tapu Lele's got Shadow Ball here, which I'm assuming is to help hit opposing Calyrex if needed. Whimsicott for Tailwind, and Encore. Encore is an interesting pick here as well after the removal of Dynamax. Moves like Encore did actually get better, and being able to Encore a Trick Room Setter or Encore something into Protect is really good. Entei is a really solid fire type into on these teams because Incineroar is good, but it's a bit slow and doesn't really often fit the offensive capacity that the team needs in order to in order to actually output damage, right? So Entei actually gives you that ability, while also looks like they've opted for Assault Vest in order to further supplement this Pokemon's bulk. But I've been seeing Choice Scarf, Choice Band, things of that nature as well. I think Entei is really solid. Urshifu Rapid Strike again. We've got a Firewater Grass core here, a little bit of a different one than we're used to seeing, but Whimsicott is still a Grass type and does pick up the same resistances as a Grass type would. I don't know for sure what the EVs are on this Pokemon. I'm not sure if they have the same EV spread, but I believe that there's a chance that this might be the bulky variation that we saw rising up on CK49's channel. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And then Citrus Berry Ditto. Ditto gives you access to another restricted Pokemon, basically, right? So usually you see Choice Scarf Ditto, but Citrus Berry is really interesting as well. Being able to copy a boosted Xerneas or opposing restricted Pokemon is really, really cool and essentially gives you a second slot, right? This is a interesting variation of Shadow Rider offense with Mienshao. Mienshao is a Pokemon that I think is a really solid partner for this team. I think that Mienshao getting access to Wide Guard plus Fake Out is really nice for Calyrex. It also gets close combat and it is unintimidatable, which means that this close combat is going to be knocking out Incineroar. There's just like unless Incineroar runs Chople Berry or EVs for it, which is a ton of investment, it's just going to knock it out. Miracle Seed Rillaboom instead of AV, this is kind of interesting to me, but I think it just goes to complement that offensive strategy, right? This is a pretty offensive team overall, so you don't really want to have too much or too many bulky Pokemon. It just doesn't really fit the tempo of the team. So this is a Miracle Seed Rillaboom with a Citrus Berry Incineroar. Incineroar, again, like I just said about like Entei fits these teams a little bit better, just because you don't have the same like offensive capability as Entei if you're running Incineroar. Sometimes you just end up wasting Tailwind turns. Essentially, you want to be able to present offensive pressure and not waste your Tailwind turns. And actually, this team doesn't even have Tailwind, so never mind. But if you're going to be running Tailwind, you definitely need to be considering like who's dealing damage and what the general goal of your like how are you going to maximize your Tailwind turns rather than just playing defensively. And Incineroar is a bit more of a defensive pivot Pokemon, but it must have been integral to the strategy for one or two of the matchups. As you can see, it is included. Regieleki with Magnet. I think Focus Sash is the better item right now overall, but obviously with Sash on Mienshao, you can't run that. So definitely Regieleki is still good with Magnet. And then this is the Choice Scarf Ditto we were talking about earlier. This is throughout VGC's history, Choice Scarf's been really common. Just being able to outspeed the opposing restricted that you're copying is really nice. And then lastly, it looks like a variation that includes a Indeedee with Shadow Ball. This was an interesting tech that I saw somebody using to hit opposing Calyrex. You're immune to the ghost attack, you resist the psychic attack, and you definitely one-shot it with Shadow Ball. And you still get the access to Follow Me, which can be a nice defensive tool for opposing Shadowrex or whatever. And then Neolego giving you that extra oomph against Xerneas teams and Incineroar, which is another check to Calyrex. And here's that Entei again. So overall, pretty standard stuff across the board. You see 3 of these 4 teams have Tailwind Whimsicott. Two of them feature Rillaboom Incineroar, which I think is interesting. And Urshifu Water is on 2 of them as well, and Neolego on 2. So a lot of commonalities between these 2 teams, but ultimately I think that this is a really solid hyper-offensive archetype. So let's go ahead and throw up here. This was a team that I was putting together beforehand. This is how I would play Shadowrex. This is, I think Life Orb is probably the best item. Focus Sash could also have an argument as well, but I do think that Shadowrex with Life Orb just puts on a ton of offensive pressure. Expanding Force to pair with the Tapu Lele. I think these two make a really good partner together. I think that just having terrain on your team is really important. Astral Barrage for the really strong spread damage, and then Shadow Ball to hedge against opposing Wide Guard if you don't happen to bring Mienshao to break through it. Mienshao is going to run Focus Sash. Because of Focus Sash, I'm going to go max here. And then I'm going to be running Close Combat, Fake Out, Feint, and Wide Guard. Pretty stock Mienshao. You could run Ally Switch if you want. I don't really think you need it. Ally Switch is a bit more of like a defensive tool more than an offensive one in my opinion. I would much rather have access to Wide Guard, Fake Out, and Close Combat. If you wanted to run it over Feint, that's fine, but Feint does bust through Wide Guard, so keep that in mind as well. Whimsicott, I'm not entirely sure what item I would give my Whimsicott now that my Focus Sash is on Mienshao. I think that like a Mental Herb could be really interesting. You could go with a Resist Berry as well, but I think you want Moonblast. I think you want Tailwind. I do actually think in order to help the Kyogre matchup, I do think you want to have Grass Knot. And then last move is kind of up to you. Let's see what some of these other players did. It looks like there's Encore on this one. There's Protect as well. There's Cotton Spore and Taunt, and then we've got Protect on this one as well. Protect is a decent option to fight Fake Out. Um, we do have the Psychic terrain to protect a little bit from Fake Out. So I don't know if it's super necessary. Taunt could be nice to shut things down, or you could just. I think Protect could work too. We'll put Protect on here for now, but because we're not Focus Sash, I do think we have to run some bulk. I'm just going to start off with this. I think this is a fine spread to start with. Nothing super fancy. You can play around with this if you'd like to, but I think that if I was running Focus Sash, I would definitely just throw Max on there. But I think you want to be running some bulk as well. Um, Tapu Lele. A couple of different things we can do with Lele. Um, I think that I think Whimsicott Lele is a really solid lead. Some percentage of the time, I think that there's a couple of different things we can do with Lele. Looks like this person opted for Psychic Seed. I was thinking about a choice item, something like Specs maybe. This gives you like a ton of damage. You can run Psyshock, Psychic, Moonblast, and the last move could be like a coverage move. It could be. It looks like this gets Grass Knot as well. Um, could be Shadow Ball, I believe it gets. Does it not get Shadow Ball? It does get Shadow Ball. Could run Shadow Ball as well. And then you probably want to be Timid Max Speed as choice specs, but you don't have to necessarily be max attack or max special attack. You can be if you want. I think you could definitely just opt for something like this just to start off with. This seems fine. Then you, for the Urshifu Rapid Strike, this Mystic Water set seems really interesting, so I definitely think you should give it a try. I don't have it offhand, and I'm not. I'd have to pull up CK's video, but I believe it was a really bulky Adamant Urshifu Water. I also think that like Choice Band is fine too. This is a pretty straightforward team with close combat. I think we should actually put Surging Strikes in the first slot, Aqua Jet, close combat, and then like U-turn for pivoting. Um, and then Entei, you could run a couple of different things on Entei. I think Assault Vest is probably fine. Sacred Fire, Stone Edge, Extreme Speed, and Snarl. Not entirely sure what you would want to go. I think you would want to be max speed. But then from there you could do a couple of different things. You could EV to this like first whole number here and do something like that. Whatever you kind of want to do with the bulk on Entei. But I think this is a reasonable variation. This is pretty offensive. I personally am not super great at playing this strategy. It requires that you get the lead right, and that's something that I'm not always the best at, especially when I don't know my team very well. But you do have like Whimsicott Lele into most Kyogre is going to be really scary for them, especially Specs Lele. You're just, I guess we could run Gleam here. Specs Gleam does a ton of damage. And then you've got Grass Knot after you set Tailwind. You're protecting yourself from Fake Out. You've got Wide Guard for the Kyogre matchup as well. You also have Urshifu that resists most of what they're doing. I think Entei is pretty good into Zacian. I think it's also pretty good into Xerneas. I think that Urshifu Water is pretty decent into Zacian as well, just because it's so naturally bulky. So there's options here, right? There's definitely options on this team. But this is a pretty like basic, straightforward team that I think you would be able to farm quite a few wins on the ladder with, just because it is so offensive that if you do get the leads right and you know what you want to, like know what your matchups look like, this could be really scary for your opponents to play into, right? You're just like they have to have a plan for something like this, otherwise they're just going to get blown out by how fast and offensive this team is. This team would be really weak to Trick Room, so keep that in mind. You may have to, tack a taunt somewhere. Maybe you change choice specs off of Lele and you run taunt on it, or you rely on, Entei or whatever to like Entei, Whimsicott, Mienshao stuff to like try to slow the game down a little bit. But it's definitely not going to be super easy. Um, but yeah, just keep that in mind when you're playing on the ladder. But otherwise, I think you should just be able to blow through most teams with this with a version of the team like this. If you want to go for something a little more bulky, um, this variation's good. I think this variation's fine too. I worry about running Incineroar Rillaboom on a variation that has Tailwind. I just really think you want to be taking knockouts with your Tailwind turns. But I think that this would be a really solid place to start. If you're looking for some really powerful hedges in certain matchups, I do think that Moltres Galar is really solid. I think that you can run it in a couple of different ways. I've been running max HP Assault Vest. You can also run like Papa Berry or a Pinch Berry like that, and run like um, a pretty bulky Moltres spread. It is going to be a little bit slow in terms of its base speed, but you get a ton of bulky Vs to work with. Papa Berry has some cool synergy with Berserk, so I like that. Again, Assault Vest works well too. I think its AV Zapdos is actually pretty interesting as well. I think that it's pretty good into the Kyogre teams. You can run a lot of bulk and you resist a lot of what that team is hitting you with. You resist the flying attacks. Um, you resist the Serena stuff, except for the ice attack, I guess. And then you also resist the um, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Serena, um, Tornadus, you resist. You also resist you don't really care about Incineroar all that much. You're just gonna hit it with super hard electric attacks or flying attacks. Heat Wave's good too. So Zapdos is a pretty interesting sleeper pick as well. I think Dracovish could go on a team like this too. I think Choice Scarf Dracovish is really good. Um, you quad resist Kyogre. You are really good into I shouldn't say really good, but you're pretty strong into Zacian. It has to hit you with Sacred Sword or Close Combat, whichever one it has, which you do have pretty good defenses for. And then you just pop it back with a water attack. So Choice Scarf Dracovish could be really interesting on these teams as well, as sort of a back end cleanup Pokemon. And maybe that would be. Let's actually go ahead and change that. Let's change the Urshifu. Since we have fighting coverage here, let's drop the Urshifu and let's run Dracovish. And let's run Choice Scarf. I like this a lot more, I think. This actually makes a lot of sense. So Vicious Rend goes in the first slot because that's the move you want to click if you're going to time out. Rock Slide's fine, Psychic Fangs is fine, and Crunch is the last move. And then I don't remember if Jolly or Adamant is correct. I would imagine that you want to be Jolly. You're running Strong Jaw and Vicious Rend and stuff. So yeah, I like Dracovish a lot more. This makes a lot of sense to me. Because we don't double down on our fighting weaknesses that way, or our fighting types that way, and it gives us access to another stab, really strong as well, and better into Kyogre, right? You're quad resist and you've got good bulk, compared to Urshifu, who has a bit lackluster special bulk. So I think this would be a variation of the team that I would run. God, this looks a lot better. I'm glad that I just found Dracovish right there. This looks great. I think this definitely would be something that I would consider running through. Maybe I'll do some laddering with a team like that. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I liked out of these teams. I think these three are the other like sleeper ones. Obviously, Urshifu Water we just took off, but Urshifu Water goes on this team. I think Rillaboom is likely fine, but I would prefer the offensive variant versus the Assault Vest one. I just think the Assault Vest one is better overall in the metagame, if that makes sense. But I do think that this is a really solid start for the Calyrex. There's a joke that I saw some VGC players talking about with just how strong this Calyrex Pokemon actually is. That it doesn't matter what you partner it with. You can spin a wheel of Pokemon and just randomly pick, and it's gonna be fine. I just think that Tailwind complements this Pokemon very, very well. Um, Another interesting option, if you're finding that Trick Room is a really big problem, is you could change the Lele to Indeedee Male, and you could run Psychic Surge Indeedee Male with Expanding Force, Trick Room, Imprison, and then like Shadow Ball or something. This would be a really interesting set. I like this too. The other Tapu Lele set I wanted to talk about was Scarf. We can't put it on this team, obviously, but Scarf Lele with Magic Room is really interesting. So this is an anti-Xerneas tech. Magic Room shuts off all items for 5 turns. So you're going to be faster than Xerneas for the first turn. With your Scarf, you're going to use Magic Room, nullify the Geomancy, or nullify the Power Herb. Xerneas goes for Geomancy. Now it's stuck for 1 turn, not being able to do anything. And that's when you can just double it with a really powerful attack. You've shut off your Choice Scarf as well, so you don't have to worry about it. So you could run, if you're running Scarf, you could run Modest instead. And then you could just hit, like let's just do a calc real quick. If we look at Tapu Lele, and let's look at Xerneas. Okay, so let's say it's this. This is the set that they're running, right? And you have Moonblast, and you're Modest, and you've shut down the item. Fairy Aura is on. Well, let's base it off of the base one, right? People run 252, 252. So you're going to be looking at dealing the first turn. You're going to be able to go for Magic Room plus whatever attack you want into the Xerneas, and then the next turn you can double the Xerneas. And Moonblast does almost 70% consistently. It looks like it's like going to do more than half in general. And if you've chipped it the turn before with something like Whimsicott Moonblast or something, then it's going to add up pretty quickly. So that's a variation of it that you can go with. I think Specs is fine for this team, especially if you're going to run Dracovish. But Indeedee Mail could also be really good here as an Imprisoned Trick Room, Expanding Force, Shadow Ball Pokemon as well. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. A bit of a shorter one today. I don't have a lot to say about Calyrex. It's a very strong Pokemon, and I feel like a lot of you already know what the deal is with Calyrex. Just put it inside Tailwind and click buttons and knock out Pokemon, right? So yeah, that's going to do it for me today. I hope you all enjoyed. Be on the lookout for the next videos throughout this week here. We've got, like I said, more team building, some laddering, and a revisit to our Series 10 ladder, our Series 10 tier list, excuse me. So yeah, get out there and play Series 10. I know Pokemon Unite's a ton of fun. I've been playing a little bit too, but I love VGC. VGC's great. Go play some Series 10 VGC. It's a good format. Catch you all in the next video.